Chapter 360. So I died, slept for 2 weeks, and woke up in another man's underwear. No one gave me even a single second to ask the important questions. There wasn't any window for me to even speak much. I wanted to know things, like where the fuck we were. Or what exactly had happened to them after I went full suicidal maniac against a god. I did manage to piece together a very vague, heavily watered-down version of the events that transpired while I was busy sleeping after dying from tidbits of their conversation. But it was nothing even remotely concrete. Instead of answering my queries, they were more interested in interrogating me since they wanted my version of the story, of the fight that happened, the situation that spiraled me into the state Kong had found me in. So I kept answering them between sips of water and some kind of warm broth that Lily had brought me from I don't know where. I had no idea what was going on, as I said. By the end of the Q&A, my head was killing me. There was a dull, numbing ache thrashing against the back of my skull. It was steadily growing worse, as if my head had been placed on an anvil and was being beaten repeatedly with a sledgehammer. I also felt sleepy, which made absolutely no sense, because, according to what I managed to gather while everyone was shouting over each other, I had already been in a comatose state for the better part of 2 weeks. Should you even feel sleepy after being in a coma for so long? I didn't know. Anyway, seeing me doze off a few times in the middle of one-sided conversations, Juliana eventually pushed everyone out of the room and told me to rest for a while. When I looked at her, I couldn't help but notice the deep, dark circles under her eyes. They contrasted against her fair skin and made the blue in her eyes pop out a lot more. I must have been staring at her face, because she stopped right as she was about to exit as well. What? Her voice sounded huskier than usual. Nothing, I said after a moment, pointing vaguely at her face. You look tired. She arched a thin eyebrow and tucked a few loose strands of her cotton white hair, which had now grown long enough to be brushing against her shoulder blades. When she spoke again, her dry tone carried the familiar edge she used whenever she felt insulted. If you're suddenly so worried about my declining beauty, maybe don't almost die next time. That way, I won't have to spend 14 nights deciding whether I should start digging a grave or start praying. I didn't call you ugly. She didn't wait for me to finish. She stepped through the curtain and let the heavy fabric fall back into place with a dull thud. I was left alone. So, that meant she was worried about me, right? I scratched my chin. No, I'm definitely reading too much into it. Clearing my thoughts, I went back to sleep. I woke up 10 hours later. Hey, don't judge me. You can call me lazy after you kill a god and come back from the dead. So I woke up, and immediately screamed, because the moment I opened my eyes, Michael's face filled my entire field of vision. Naturally, when I screamed, he screamed too and jumped back as if he'd seen a ghost. I jumped upright, crossing one arm over my naked chest. What do you want now that you already stole my dignity? Are you here for seconds? And no, I was checking on you because you were mumbling very loudly in your sleep. Michael threw his hands forward defensively. And what, Sam, Alexia and I were on your bed this morning because Julie gave you the biggest bed. Ours was really small and uncomfortable. So after 3 sleepless nights, we reached our breaking point and started sneaking in here. Oh, yeah, I climbed off the bed and pointed accusingly at him. Then why were you shirtless? I sleep shirtless. He pulled at his hair, then pointed back at me. And you're shirtless too, ... Wait, no, yeah, I looked down. Sure enough, I was wearing nothing but a pair of underwear briefs. Not a single other piece of clothing existed anywhere on my body. There was a featureless white mask lying next to the spot where I was sleeping. But I decided to ignore it for now and return to it later. Why am I naked? I asked aloud. Michael gave me is this guy serious? Look. Then explained to me how my dimensional storage robe was utterly damaged. Ray's dimensional pouch had also been blown to smithereens. Only Alexia still had her spatial trunk item card, but it was filled only with girly clothes, which he doubted I'd ever want to wear. I agreed. It did have some of Kang's clothes, but aside from the difference in our physiques being an issue, there was also another problem. During the initial days of my recovery, they needed to change the makeshift bandages on my chest multiple times a day. So they figured it'd be best, and more comfortable for me, to leave me unburdened by fabric. ... Except for one of Kang's underwear. I froze. Wait, what? You mean I'm wearing that guy's underwear right now? Yup. Oh, fuck no. Wait, wait, the difference in our physiques was an issue but not the difference in our size down there. Because there has to be a difference. There is, right, Sam, that's not how underwear works. Especially not boxer briefs. I felt my soul leave my body. I stared at the elastic waistband hugging my hips and suddenly had a violent urge to dive into a vat of bleach. I am wearing another man's underwear, I whispered, the horror sinking in. A man who is no better than a dog, Michael. Do you understand the psychological damage this is doing to me? I can feel the urges already. I feel like I need to chase mailmen and simp for someone who will never give a fuck about me. It's taking over, Michael. It's taking over. It's clean, Michael shouted, his face burning red. It's fine. Stop being dramatic. Dramatic. Michael, my dick is currently being cradled by the property of a guy who probably licks his own. I cut myself off, taking a deep, calming breath. No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, see, it's fine. Now can we please, what the fuck are you doing? I was removing the underwear. Why are you stripping? Michael slapped his hands over his face, though he still peeked from between his fingers. Oh my god. I kicked the offending fabric across the room and grabbed the bedsheet. Using my power, I reshaped it into a Roman-style tunic and draped it over my body. Okay, much better. After my little strip show, Michael and I finally talked. Well, first he needed several minutes to recover from the visual trauma of witnessing what he still claims to this day he definitely didn't witness. But then we talked. He started telling me everything that had happened in detail. While I was fighting and dying against the god who eats the rest of the group had been holding Michael back, trying to knock him out. Apparently, that simple task was far more difficult than it sounded. Juliana eventually outwitted him, but by then, Lily and Ray were in critical condition. She had been pierced through the lower abdomen and was rapidly losing blood. He had suffered extensive burn damage. It was a miracle they lasted as long as they did. Alexia, after bonding with the ring of healing and sealing the wound in my chest, repairing my lungs and heart, immediately ran toward the rest of the group, leaving me in Kang's care. And according to the mutt, I still wasn't breathing, so he performed CPR, another fact I did not enjoy learning. But even that didn't work. I still wasn't breathing, my heart was still as dead as the rest of me. He was about to lose hope and give up, when I finally gasped all of a sudden. I had been dead for 7 minutes before my heart miraculously started beating again. And so I lived. Chapter 361, Weight of Aftermath. While that was happening, Alexia reached the rest of them shortly after. First, she treated Lily. Then she had to stop for a while, nearly collapsing from the sheer amount of essence she had burned through in such a short span of time, before she could even think about moving on to Ray. Michael also needed immediate treatment after Juliana put him down with a neurotoxin. Alexia did everything she could for him, but she still couldn't save the eye he'd been stabbed in. Wait, what did you say? I frowned and leaned closer to Michael, studying him as if I were seeing him for the first time. His right eye was closed, a long pale scar cutting across it like a slash of white paint. Oh, fuck, did you actually lose an eye? Michael looked personally offended. You're just noticing now. We've been talking for a while. I thought you were trying out some new edgy fashion statement to look cool. Quote. Respectfully, what is wrong with you? Yeah, I really needed to start paying more attention to the people around me. It was strange, having no right arm. I kept reaching for things without thinking. Trying to grab, to steady myself, and to move fingers that simply weren't there. There was nothing there, nothing but a weird phantom sensation. And then there was a problem of not being able to maintain balance properly. Turns out, losing a limb seriously messes with your center of gravity. I nearly tripped twice just walking out of the shelter I had woken up in. But once I did step outside, I forgot about all those little troubles for a moment and just admired the small wooden cabin before us to its absolute fullness. Because yes, it was a cabin that we had walked out of, made from massive tree logs stacked together with a surprising amount of architectural precision. The bark of the wood hadn't been stripped away, leaving the entire cabin tinted in a deep charcoal shade of gray, the same color as the majority of the trees in the forest beyond this shore. And yes, we were on the shore of the Lake of Grief, where the sand was white like snow. The edge of the beach in the distance blurred into the silver of the shimmering sea that looked as ghostly as it was beautiful under the glow of the crimson moon. The air outside was cold and salty. It stung my tongue and made my half-healed wounds itch under the straps of bandages. I hadn't really had time to appreciate this place the first time I saw it. You know, busy fighting a fallen god and all. But now it looked almost unreal, almost dreamlike. Somewhere behind the cabin, on the other side of it, I could hear the sounds of muffled laughter and idle chatter. Judging by how far away the commotion was coming from, and how much splashing water and collective yelling were involved, they were probably doing something that required a lot of teamwork. Curious, I wanted to see what they were up to. But Michael chose that time to continue his story. Apparently, according to Kong, he had managed to retrieve most of the relics from the god who eats his corpse. But not all of them. The most important missing one was the obsidian spike that had been lodged in my chest when he and Alexia found me. The divine extraction needle. Kong insisted that when he swam back to the shore with my unconscious body on his back, then returned to the ice islet to gather the remaining artifacts, the stake had simply vanished. He searched for it for as long as he could, but the glacier platform began cracking unnaturally from below. Because deep water beasts were ramming into it with frenzied hunger, emboldened now that the crushing presence of the god had disappeared with his death. In the end, Kong was forced to retreat. He barely escaped with his life as the ginormous sea monsters tore the ice apart, and in the chaos, he lost several more artifacts. I felt my eyelid twitch inside, the air leaking from my lips like a punctured tire. Lost them. Divine artifacts aren't loose change you drop between couch cushions, Kong. They're literally god-tier loot. Damn that dog. Michael winced at me with his one good eye. Be fair, Sam, come on, he's still only a sea ranker. Between collapsing ice, giant sea monsters, and carrying injured people back and forth, it's a miracle he retrieved as many artifacts as he did. Yeah, I muttered, tugging my bedsheet toga tighter as cold wind rolled off the silver sea. The phantom ache in my missing hand flared again, making me shiver. We stood there in silence for a while, staring out at the endless stretch of the lake of grief. The swishing sound of the waves swallowed the silence between us. After a long moment, Michael raised a hand to his face and let out a shuddering breath into his palm. Then his shoulders began to tremble, subtle tremors breaking through his usual upbeat facade. Right there, under the haunting light of the bleeding moon, he looked less like some destined hero and more like a boy who had suddenly realized the weight he carried might be too heavy to bear after all. It broke something in my chest. I knew Michael Godswill was mentally one of the toughest people I had ever met. But seeing him break down so pitifully made me realize a fact I had been subconsciously ignoring all this time. He was just a kid. We all were. We weren't even 18 yet. Not all of us. We were barely young adults. And yet we'd been forced to watch each other bleed to near death and endure trauma no one our age should be put through to suffer. We didn't deserve this. We didn't deserve any of this. It was all so inhumane. Michael, I said softly, my voice barely audible over the crashing of the silver waves. I almost killed them, Sam, he whispered. And his voice finally broke. Ray, Vince, Lily, if Juliana hadn't stopped me. But she did, I said, more firmly than I intended. I tried to cross my arms, remembered I only had one, and settled for tucking my left hand into the folds of my toga. Stop beating yourself about what ifs. He sobbed a few more times and shook his head, still hiding his face, only now his nails were digging into his cheek. Hey, I muttered, nudging him with my shoulder. Don't get too depressed. If you start crying, I'll take it as a challenge and we'll end up in a full-blown crying marathon. I don't have enough bedsheets to turn into tissues for both of us. He gave a choked-off laugh and lowered his hand, the tearful wetness of his single eye was rimmed with a silver glow reflecting off the sea. Then he nodded. We sat there on the beach and kept talking for, I honestly don't remember for how long. Michael told me about what happened after he came back to his senses. He said he had a long conversation with the rest of the group. Naturally, some of them, Vince and Ray, were visibly uncomfortable around him. So Michael decided to tell them the truth about his demon sword. He told them he had come into contact with it and what it really was. That revelation shocked them more than it frightened them. What followed was a long, exhausting chain of questions and answers that Michael described as nothing but pure mental torture. I could relate. By the end of it, however, the majority of them seemed to have reached a shaky kind of peace with him. And by the next day, mostly everything returned to normal. Mostly. While nearly everyone understood that what happened to Michael wasn't Michael's fault and that he had been manipulated, one person still avoided him like the plague. It was Lily. She won't even look at me, Michael groaned, clearly on the verge of crying again. I've tried to talk to her alone so many times, but she keeps distance. Yeah, I couldn't blame her. She had only recently found out she'd been coerced into getting together with the boys she thought she loved, which she did, but I had no doubt she was definitely questioning the genuineness of her feelings right now. It was a mess. I could have gone to Lily and explained that what she felt wasn't fake. That Zaldrith couldn't create emotions, only amplify what was already there. But that would require telling her things I didn't want to tell her, or didn't know how to tell her. So I did the next best thing. I patted Michael's hunched back. There, I said solemnly. That's rough, buddy, but don't worry, plenty of fish in the sea. I'll find you a new girl. You already seem to like the ones I choose anyway, right? He turned slowly and glared at me. You're such an asshole. I burst out laughing, and after rolling his eyes, so did he. When the moment settled, Michael grew quiet again. Then, in a small voice, he said, I'm sorry. Huh, I glanced at him. For what? You know, he said vaguely. Actually, I didn't. There were 100 things he could be apologizing for, and most of them were truly never his fault. I could have told him that, but I knew empty reassurances wouldn't mean much unless I answered honestly. So I shrugged. I'm sorry too. Huh, for what? You know. Chapter 362. My awakening as an empath. I never, ever wanted to hear that I couldn't console people ever again, especially not from Lily. In fact, I wished I could drag her here by the collar just to show her what a splendid job I had done with her ex-boyfriend. I think I had awakened my empathy while listening to Michael vent. And if I dare say so myself, I handled it better than any puny therapist ever could have had. Aha, perhaps I should consider a career in therapy after all this Spirit King drama is over. Yeah, I realized I had a natural talent for this sort of thing. I could profit off other people's trauma. Wait, no. I meant heal their trauma. No, really, I wasn't even exaggerating. Michael kept wailing about what he should do now, how he should move forward, how he had messed up and should have seen it coming, how he should deal with Zaldrith, yada yada yada. And I, like the newly enlightened man I had become, guided him through every doubt, every confusion, and every spiraling uncertainty. I could have made jokes. I could have brushed aside his crying and overthinking with humor. I could have bullied him. God knows I had several golden opportunities to bully him. But I didn't, because I was mature now. I was a mature and responsible young man who had my emotional growth. So instead, I gave him feedback. I offered solutions. I even endured the messy, snot-filled details of his internal crisis without once mentioning how he was currently devaluing my favorite and only bedsheet toga by wiping his tears all over my sleeves. I calmly helped him through his mental health issues. And I succeeded. Before long, actually, no. It was long. It took about 2 to 3 hours until his mood was lifted and his spirits were high. Then I started bullying him. Okay, so maybe I'm not an empath. Sue me. I did enjoy it, though. Hey, it was right around then that the sound of splashing and yelling grew progressively louder. I frowned. What are the others even doing? Fuck you, Michael snapped, clearly triggered by something I had just said. But being the goody two-shoes that he was, he couldn't maintain the sass for more than 3 seconds. They're probably fishing for dinner. And building a ship. Oh, I see, I nodded sagely. Then I paused. Huh. When we rounded the corner to go around the cabin, the first thing I saw was Ray trying to wrestle a giant, bioluminescent, crab-like creature into submission. It was, understandably, a difficult task for him, considering he only had one proper hand to work with. Vince was assisting him by wielding a massive shield like a giant spatula, attempting to flip the many-legged nightmare onto its back so Ray could deliver a finishing blow with a short sword. Keep its pincers away from my good arm. Ray roared, his face turning purple with effort. I'm down one hand already, Vince. If I lose the other, I'll lose my mind. Shut up and pin it. Vince grunted, the shield sparking as the crab's chitinous legs scraped against the metal. Okay, now. Vince took several heavy steps back, then rammed back into the beast, successfully upturning it. As soon as the crab was flipped over, Ray immediately plunged his sword into the soft underbelly of the monster. With one wet couch sound, the beast became our dinner. Ray staggered back, panting, and wiped a streak of glowing blue fluid from his forehead. That makes 29th for the day. Those crabs are strong underwater. Invisible too, Michael explained to me, but once we get them onto land, most of their abilities are useless. I stared at the pile of twitching remains and tilted my head. They killed 29 of those things. What are we doing, opening a seafood franchise when we get back? Ray noticed us then and gave me a sly grin. He made a comment about how nice my dress looked. I immediately called him an uncultured swine and informed him that this was a Roman toga. It didn't matter. Vince joined in too, saying I looked pretty. I told both of them to fuck off. Just then, Kong burst out of the silver water, huffing and puffing. His face was bright red as yet another glowing crab chased him onto shore. Ray and Vince swiftly moved back into position, intercepting the creature while Kong bent over, hands on his knees, recovering his breath. Once the crab was dealt with, Kong dove straight back into the sea like a suicidal fisherman. Michael grinned beside me. Actually, most of these aren't for eating. Well, the legs are. But the shells, we need those for the hull. He gestured toward the shoreline, and that was when I spotted something that I had no idea how I missed until he pointed it out. It looked like a ship. Or, more accurately, the skeleton of one. It was a large structure, roughly 20 feet long, assembled from a bizarre mixture of sturdy wooden logs, flexible saplings, and the translucent, iridescent carapaces of the giant crabs that I just witnessed Ray and Vince hunting down. All the materials were stitched together into a half-formed hull that glimmered faintly under the light of the crimson moon, like the bones of some otherworldly creature being reborn as a vessel. And right in the middle of it all was Alexia. From the way she casually carried heavy logs under one arm and expertly pulled thick plant fibers with the other, quite literally sewing wood and shell together. As if she were stitching fabric, I could immediately tell that most of her strength had returned. There was no strain in her movements. None at all, even as she exerted an unreasonable amount of power to shape the hull almost entirely by herself, her posture remained as relaxed and graceful as her movements were smooth and efficient. Michael didn't need to explain who had built the cabin anymore. It was obviously her. I looked around again, and at a short distance away, I noticed Lily. She was sitting cross-legged in the sand, surrounded by what could only be described as a mountain of oversized rib bones. Her hands were holding what I assumed was Juliana's katana, and she used it to methodically dismantle the carcasses of those translucent beasts. Wow, everyone is working so hard, is what I thought, until the moment my gaze landed on Juliana Vox Blade. My shadow was humming a catchy tune to herself, her cotton white hair tied up in a high ponytail as she serenely roasted strips of tender meat over an open flame. Did she take the easiest fucking job? I was absolutely indignant. While the rest of them were wrestling aquatic nightmares and performing backbreaking manual labor, she was sitting there like she was at a summer camp barbecue. What a slacker. She didn't even have a smudge of soot on her face. Maybe Juliana sensed my judgmental vibes, because she turned her head in my direction and clapped pleasantly. Oh, you're awake. Come eat. Nice dress, by the way. It's not a dress. It's a toga. A toga. I raged, then scoffed dramatically. And I will eat, but shouldn't you be helping with something more strenuous? Poor Ray is out there fighting one beast after another with only one hand, and Alexia is building a goddamn ship alone. Juliana glanced at me dryly, then returned her attention to the sizzling crab meat and echoed my scoff. Since when did you start worrying about fair labor distribution? Also, Alexia is surprisingly good at naval engineering when she's motivated by the desire to sleep in a real bed. So stop stressing about little things and sit down to enjoy my culinary brilliance. I wanted to argue. I really did want to bring justice to the other laborers. But the closer I got, the more the scent of roasted meat invaded my nose, and my stomach suddenly remembered that it had been empty for what must have been like several weeks at that point. My legs also began to shake because I had absolutely no energy left to stand and be morally outraged. So I surrendered to hunger. I decided to drop onto a nearby log and devour the first batch of meat she was about to hand me. But just as I moved, something shiny caught light in the corner of my vision. I snapped my head toward it and practically gasped. It was a golden greatsword, plunged into the ground near the far end of the cabin. It gleamed softly in the eternal dim light of this white shore, its blade reflecting the silver sea behind it like a mirror of moonlight. My eyes widened. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Ever. Slowly and reverently, I extended my hand toward it. The sword trembled once, as if reacting to my yearning. Then it tore itself free from the white sand and shot toward me, drawn by an unseen force. I started running toward it at the same time. And I swear the entire scene started playing in slow motion with an emotional orchestral music swelling theatrically in the background. The wind whipped my toga around my legs. White sand kicked up in a dramatic spray behind my heels. My heart hammered in my ribs with pure, unfiltered joy. Oriath, my beautiful, golden, priceless, God-slaying baby. I reached out with my only hand, fingers splayed and ready to feel that familiar weighted leather grip settle perfectly into my palm. We were going to be reunited. We were going to. Clang. The sword did not land in my hand. Because I was a one-armed man with the balance of a confused toddler, I misjudged the trajectory entirely. The hilt of the greatsword missed my palm. Instead, the flat of the massive blade smacked me squarely in the forehead. Gack. I went down hard. The orchestral music in the background screeched like a dying record player and came to a stop. I collapsed into the sand, but still did not let go of Oriath. Because I was never letting her go now. Never. Yes, her, by the way. She was my baby now. I hugged her tightly and rolled around in the sand while kissing her radiant blade, essentially cradling a 5-foot slab of golden metal like it was a newborn infant. I groaned, half in pain and fully in bliss. Oh, my sweet baby. I thought I'd never see you again. Why did you take so long to come back to me, huh? Do you know how worried I was for your safety? Are you okay? Did the god's nasty ichor stain my pretty baby's pretty face? Don't worry, Papa's here. The silence from the rest of the beach was loud. Ray and Vince had stopped wrestling the 31st crab to stare at me. Hell, even the crab was staring at me. Michael was rubbing his temples with both hands. Even Alexia paused mid-scene to watch me make out with a broadsword. Juliana went right back to flipping meat as if this were a perfectly normal occurrence that she had to deal with on a daily basis. He has lost it. Did he ever have it, to begin with? Is he happier to reunite with a fucking sword than he was to see us?